The night of March 13, 1964, in Kew Gardens, Queens, did not just end a life, it birthed a shadow that would hang over American social psychology for decades. The murder of 28-year-old Catherine "Kitty" Genovese became more than a crime. It became a parable of urban decay and moral apathy. It forced a mirror in front of the American public, asking a terrifying question: why do we freeze when others are in danger? What follows is a deep psychological analysis of the bystander effect and diffusion of responsibility. We will dissect the mythology of the Genovese case, walk through the smoke-filled laboratories of the 1960s, and arrive at the modern science of why good people do nothing and how we can train our brains to override that instinct. Part 1. The parable and the reality. The narrative that shocked the world. To understand the psychology, we must first understand the story that triggered the research. 2 weeks after Genovese's murder, the New York Times ran a front-page article by Martin Gansberg with the headline that would become legendary: 37 who saw murder didn't call the police, later corrected to 38 in popular lore. The narrative was visceral. It described 38 law-abiding citizens watching a killer stalk a woman in 3 separate attacks over 35 minutes. They reportedly watched from their windows, turning on lights, but never coming down, never calling the police until it was too late. One neighbor was famously quoted as saying, "I didn't want to get involved." This quote became the epitaph for an era. It painted a picture of a cold, callous New York City where human connection had severed. But from a psychological perspective, apathy was a lazy explanation. It was too simple. The historical correction: myth versus mechanism. Modern historical analysis, particularly by researchers like Rachel Manning, 2007, has revealed that the 38 witnesses story was largely a fabrication of sensationalist journalism and police frustration. The reality: there were likely only a dozen witnesses who heard something. The ambiguity: few, if any, saw the entire attack. Many thought it was a lover's quarrel or a drunk argument leaving a bar, a common occurrence in 1964 Queens. The action: some people did try to help. One man yelled, "Let that girl alone," which temporarily drove the attacker away. Police were contacted, but the primitive reporting systems of the time, pre-911, meant calls were often lost or deprioritized. Why this matters psychologically: if 38 people callously watched a murder, that is sociopathy. But if decent people heard screams, looked at their neighbors' dark windows, felt unsure, and hesitated until it was too late, that is social psychology. The reality is far more frightening because it suggests this could happen to anyone, anywhere, not because they are bad, but because they are human. Part 2. The laboratory of inaction. Enter Leightonay and Darley. Bibb Leightonay, Columbia University, and John Darley, NYU, were the first to treat this not as a moral failing, but as a cognitive error. They hypothesized that the presence of others inhibits helping. To prove it, they staged some of the most famous experiments in U.S. history. Experiment 1. The smoke-filled room. The setup: Columbia University students were invited to a room to fill out a questionnaire. The crisis: while they worked, smoke began pouring through a vent in the wall. The conditions: alone, when the student was alone, 75% reported the smoke within minutes. With passive confederates, when the student was with 2 actors who were told to ignore the smoke, only 10% reported it. They would cough, wave smoke away, and keep working, following the herd into potential danger. With naive strangers, when 3 real participants were in the room, only 38% of the groups reported it. The insight: the students weren't indifferent to fire, they were indifferent to their own survival instincts if the social proof suggested safety. Experiment 2. The seizure study. The setup: students sat in isolated booths, communicating via intercom to discuss college life. They were told this was to preserve anonymity. The crisis: one participant, a recording, staged a terrifying epileptic seizure. I think I need, if could, somebody, give me a little, help here, because, I'm, having a real problem. The result: if the participant believed they were the only one listening, 85% got help within 60 seconds. If they believed one other person was listening, 62% helped. If they believed 4 other people were listening, only 31% helped. This cemented the bystander effect. The probability of help is inversely related to the number of bystanders. Part 3. The architecture of hesitation. Why does this happen? It is not simple fear. It is a complex interplay of 3 specific psychological mechanisms. 1. Diffusion of responsibility. This is the mathematical dilution of duty. If you are the only witness, the burden of action is 100% on your shoulders. If you don't act, the person dies and it is your fault. However, if there are 10 witnesses, you only feel 10% responsible. You assume someone else, someone smarter, stronger, or closer to a phone, has already called the police. Psychological trap: someone else will do it. 2. Pluralistic ignorance. Social proof. In ambiguous situations, like hearing a scream that might be a fight or a murder, we look to others to define reality. You hear a crash. You look at the person next to you. They are trying to stay calm to not look like a coward. You see their calm face and think, they aren't worried, so I shouldn't be either. The result: a room full of people internally panicking but externally appearing calm, convincing each other that nothing is wrong. 3. Evaluation apprehension. This is the fear of social blunders. In U.S. culture, we are socialized to be cool and composed. Rushing in to save someone who is actually just having a loud argument with their spouse is embarrassing. We fear overreacting more than we fear inaction, largely because the social cost of looking foolish is immediate, while the cost of inaction is theoretical. Part 4. The cognitive gauntlet. The 5 steps. Latene and Darley mapped out the decision tree a human must climb to actually offer help. Failure at any stage results in inaction. Notice the event. You must actually see or hear it. In the age of smartphones and noise-canceling headphones, this is the biggest modern barrier. Interpret it as an emergency. You must break through pluralistic ignorance. That is not a drunk person, that is a stroke victim. Assume responsibility. You must overcome diffusion. No one else is helping. It is up to me. Know how to help. Do you know CPR? Do you know the number for campus security? If you feel incompetent, you will freeze. Decide to implement help. You must weigh the costs, danger, time, legal liability, against the benefits. The freezing effect. Most bystanders do not decide not to help. They simply get stuck looping between steps 2 and 3, waiting for more information until the emergency is over. Part 5. The U.S. response and modern application. The bystander effect is not a death sentence for altruism. Since 1964, U.S. society has engineered systems to bypass these psychological flaws. 1. The 911 system. It is often forgotten that in 1964, there was no centralized emergency number in the U.S. You had to dial 0 for operator or know your local precinct's number. The frustration of the Genovese case was a primary driver for the implementation of the 911 system in the late 1960s. This technology specifically lowers the barrier for step 4, knowing how to help. You don't need to be a doctor or a cop, you just need to know 3 digits. 2. Bystander intervention training, Green Dot, or the 5 Ds. Today, on U.S. college campuses and in corporate HR training, We see the legacy of this research in programs like Green Dot. These programs teach students they don't have to be a superhero to intervene. They use the 5 Ds to bypass evaluation apprehension. Direct, confront the situation. Distract, spill a drink or ask for the time to interrupt a harassment situation. Breaks the freeze without confrontation. Delegate, find a bouncer or RA. Overcomes lack of competence. Delay, check on the victim after the fact. Document, record the incident if safe. The reversal, we-ness. Modern research shows the bystander effect vanishes when the group shares a psychological identity. If a group of strangers is told, "You are all Knicks fans," and they see a person in a Knicks jersey get hurt, they help faster in a group than alone. Shared identity creates a we that dissolves the diffusion of responsibility. Part 6. Conclusion. The bystander effect is one of the most robust findings in social psychology, replicated in countries and cultures globally, but it is arguably most poignant in the US, where the values of individualism collision violently with the diffusion of responsibility in crowded cities. The lesson of Kitty Genovese is not that humans are heartless, it is that heroism is a conscious choice, not a reflex. Our reflexes are wired to conform, to wait, and to look at others. To save a life, you must be willing to break the social contract of mind your own business. You must be willing to be the one fool who screams, "Fire," in a silent room. Understanding the mechanism is the first step to breaking it. Once you know that your brain is lying to you about the safety of the situation, you are free to act.